So welcome to the Diversity Dialogue with me. I have a many time over past guest and friend, Cat Coode. Welcome, Cat.
Thank you so much.
And quick intro, and then I'll have you talk about yourself. Data privacy guru extraordinaire. In fact, I would say probably my number one go-to person when it comes to data privacy. As I just found out, she's also the top 20 women in cyber in Canada. So congrats on that, Cat.
Thank you so much again.
So why do a quick intro of yourself and then we'll dive in.
Sure. So I'm an engineer by trade. I came from the technical side of things. Spent over a decade at BlackBerry where privacy and cybersecurity were paramount. And then watched the birth of iPhone where people thought cooler was better and people lost the care for privacy and cybersecurity. So 8 years ago, I became a privacy consultant to help companies and people better understand where their data is going, how it's being used, and help to protect that data.
Wow, BlackBerry reminded me of RIM. Yeah, research in motion. Yeah.
Nobody knows that anymore. It's just BlackBerry.
I know, just BlackBerry. Right? It's all. I'm dating myself. So I know you talk a lot about diversity, but let's talk about the business impact of diversity on cybersecurity, right? Which isn't talked about as much. I mean, there's a human aspect and inclusion, which is great, but then if you were to go talk to a CFO, if you were to go talk to the business owner, saying why does he or she really care about diversity in cybersecurity?
That's a great one. So first to say diversity is, I mean, we often talk about gender diversity, but diversity is all sorts of things, right? Diversity is age and background and ethnicity, like it's 100 different things. One really great example that we had in the pandemic about the importance of diversity was considering people's home situations from a remote work perspective. And so what you would get is someone who is running an IT department that thought, okay, I need to set this person up with a laptop, and that laptop has to have, let's say, endpoint detection on it. So we know who's logging in when. Great. But what you would have is you would have people who maybe had no roommates or who older kids that had nobody else in their homes and were free to use their laptops anywhere in their houses. Then you would have situations where you had roommates and therefore they may not have had the audio or visual privacy physically for that laptop. So then what supports then do you need to provide for that laptop to ensure that people can't see the screen or hear Zoom meetings that are on it? Yeah. Then you had parents with children who were trying to log into things. And a lot of parents were, if they didn't have their own laptop, were giving laptops that might be work laptops to their kids. So just having that diversity of perspective on what does your home look like? What do I have to protect in your home? And so one of the recommendations I often gave, especially IT leaders and cyber leaders, was to ask their workforce, like, what does your situation look like right now? Who needs access? Where are you? Because we create all of these security concepts around an in-person thing. And then the minute you put someone in their own home, everything changes, even public Wi-Fi access, right? So all of that kind of stuff in diversity in perspective of how are you using the tools that we're giving you.
So that actually leads to an interesting segue, right? As we were talking, is the managers, he or she being asked to go and ask their employees about their home situation. And that isn't something that managers typically had to deal with when they were physically in location, right? So how has that been perceived when it comes to this whole debate of treat everybody the same, but knowing that everybody's situation is not the same, and the managers they had to be retrained to talk about, okay, there are boundaries that you probably never crossed when you were all in a physical location, but now you better cross those boundaries because you need to understand, to your point about, hey, whether you have kids at home, whether you're sharing with another roommate, what's going on over there. Has that, I mean, within a year and a half since the pandemic hit, have you seen that shift happen to actually kind of make those inroads, if you will?
Yeah, so we're at this fine line between, you and I always talk about how privacy and security work together, yeah. But we're now in this fine line about how privacy and security are against each other. And we've got the same things like with COVID passports and all of that stuff. Like you want to secure your workforce and your people, but to do so, there's some private information that you may require. There are ways to request that information to say, let me know, like, here are the options of things we could provide. There were some companies that were providing more comfortable chairs and all these things. And I'm like, you could get a green screen for $50 in some places. That might be work expense that's worth doing, because you're allowing people, you have a nice background right now. I've got a blurred background. But there was a while at the beginning of the pandemic where Teams and Microsoft were not, Teams and Zoom were not allowing people to easily blur backgrounds. And so I, like, the number of meetings I took with people in their bedrooms and like all sorts of, or I could see their family members walking in the background. I'm like, I don't want to see your private information. I don't want to know what your house looks like. That's not my business. So things like that for an employer to be able to say, hey, here's what we can provide. We can provide headphones so that people can hear your meetings. We can provide green screens if you do not have a place in your apartment or your home. And then that way you're not prying into that information, but you're still allowing them to preserve their own personal privacy and to protect the security of your data as a company.
Yeah, I think those are great tips indeed. I have a green screen somewhere, but again, like you said, as technology has improved and you have a blurred background, I have a virtual background. things obviously we move on as well, right? So talking about the obstacles to diversity, again, going back to seeing Cat as one of the top 20 women in cyber in Canada, that obviously there are people that you look up to and say, if she can do it, so can I, right? But yet at the same time, I think you'd mentioned in a post of yours, less than 30% of women in cyber today, right? There's still a huge male-dominated field, unfortunately, even after so many decades. So talk a little bit, what are some of the major obstacles even today for getting just gender diversity? And then we can talk about the other aspects of diversity, which obviously minorities, there is people without college degrees and certifications, and how do you kind of break that barrier?
Yeah, so that's really hard. Part of the thing with both privacy and cybersecurity is that job is always on. We don't have enough bodies in the industry at all. You talk about people who are CISOs, that is an incredibly demanding job. And then even, I work with a team of privacy lawyers, and actually they're predominantly women, and they're working around the clock because they cannot get this stuff done fast enough. So from the legal team all the way up to the highly technical people who are your sysadmins, whatever it is in between, cybersecurity has that notion, which it's true, it can be a very demanding job. So women tend to shy away from that because, again, as you're moving through your life, it tends to be that women are the primary parents. And then that just generalizes that the women don't go into the industry. And that's part of the problem. I believe you can carve out a place for yourself in this industry that works for you. One of the reasons I left big tech and started my own company was for that reason. So, there are Fridays I don't book meetings so I can have the day off. Or you and I had talked about how I need to pick my daughter up so I don't schedule meetings in that window, right? So there are ways to find positions and roles that do work for your schedule if that is something that you're hesitant about. But as you said, we're still looking for more women. Women are risk adverse. Women are the ones that tend to go, what could go wrong? Mm-hmm. And what are all the things I should do to mitigate? And just to totally stereotype, but if you get in a car with two parents of a 2-year-old, the mom will have packed extra diapers, extra clothes, extra snacks, and the dad's just let's go. What are we waiting for? What are you still packing? She's dressed. Why are you packing extra stuff? But that's because that's what women do. We're what are all the things that could go wrong? And how do I plan for all of those things? Which makes women the ideal candidates for cybersecurity. That is exactly what we need. What is the worst case scenario? So just pointing out, from a privacy perspective, people are oh, we collect this, but we don't do anything bad with it. I'm I appreciate that. But what is the worst case that could happen if someone did do something bad with it? And then is that too much of a risk to actually collect that data or handle that data? So so that is, you're right. It's a problem because we don't have enough maybe visibility because there are a lot of women in the industry coming in. But helping women understand that you can make your own space in this industry and you can make a job that works for you.